to. So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself who taught you to hate being what God gave you.
How did one man go from petty criminal to becoming a global voice against racism? He's one of the most prominent Muslims in modern history and a symbol of black liberation who has inspired generations. A gangster, a preacher, and a revolutionary, this is the extraordinary journey of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was born in 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. His parents, Earl and Louise Little, were followers of the Pan-African activist Marcus Garvey. As a result, their family was subjected to constant harassment by the Ku Klux Klan, who burned down their home when Malcolm was just 4 years old. The family moved to Michigan, where they were threatened by the Black Legion, an offshoot of the KKK. 4 of Malcolm's uncles were also murdered by white racists. Malcolm's father died when he was 6. The incident was officially ruled a streetcar accident, although his mother believed he had ultimately been murdered by the Black Legion. When Malcolm was 13, his mother was committed to a mental institution. Her children were split up and sent to different foster homes. Malcolm was an excellent student, but dropped out of school after a white teacher told him it was unrealistic for a young black boy to have aspirations of being a lawyer. After a few years in Michigan and Boston, he moved to Harlem at the age of 18, where he was involved in gambling, robbery, drug dealing, and pimping. At the age of 21, after committing a string of robberies with a small gang in Boston, Malcolm was arrested and sentenced to 8 to 10 years at Charlestown State Prison. Incarceration was the beginning of Malcolm's transformation. While in prison, his siblings began writing to him about the Nation of Islam and its leader, Elijah Muhammad. The Nation of Islam promoted black independence and rejected the notion of the superiority of white people. Instead, Elijah Muhammad taught his followers a form of separatism from whites, who were actually considered devils, inferior to black people who were the original inhabitants of Earth. Malcolm, initially hostile to the idea of any religion, eventually became a member of the nation. He read books constantly and began writing regularly to Elijah Muhammad. Muhammad's followers were taught to abandon their given family names, as they were actually the names of former slave owners. So Malcolm Little became Malcolm X. After being paroled, Malcolm visited Elijah Muhammad in Chicago. In June the next year, he was named Assistant Minister of the Nation of Islam's Temple No. 1 in Detroit. He later established Boston's Temple No. 11 and expanded Temple No. 12 in Philadelphia.
And those of you who think that you perhaps came here to hear us tell you to turn the other cheek to the brutality of the white man, I say again, you came to the wrong place.
Finally, he was selected to lead Temple No. 7 in Harlem, where he was responsible for a huge surge in membership.
We don't teach you to turn the other cheek. We don't teach you to turn the other cheek in the South, and we don't teach you to turn the other cheek in the North. We teach you to obey the law. We teach you to carry yourselves in a respectable way. But at the same time, we teach you that anyone who puts his hand on you, do your best to see that he doesn't put it on anybody else.
The FBI now had him under surveillance due to his sudden profile as the nation's rising star. Malcolm's rise to national prominence happened in 1957, when he intervened at a police station to arrange for medical assistance and legal help for members of the nation who had been beaten and arrested by New York police. The crowd of protesters outside grew to almost 4,000. Witnessing Malcolm's control of the crowd shook the New York Police Department. Within weeks, they had him under surveillance and officially began infiltrating the nation. In 1958, Malcolm married his wife Betty, with whom he would have 6 daughters. Malcolm's profile continued to grow via print and television appearances, and he began to gain international exposure.
Who is it that controls the prostitution in Harlem? It's the white man. Who controls the large sale of whiskey and wine? It's the white man. Who gives you the cards and the dice that you use to gamble with? It's the white man. And after he sell them to you, he catch you with them and put you in jail for using them.
He was deeply critical of the growing civil rights movement and its leaders, like Dr. Martin Luther King, who preached integration.
That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. 100 years ago, they used to put on a white sheet and use a bloodhound against Negroes. Today, they've taken off the white sheet and put on police uniforms. They've traded in the bloodhound for police dogs, and they're still doing the same thing. And just as Uncle Tom, back during slavery, used to keep the Negroes from resisting the Bloodhound or resisting the Ku Klux Klan by teaching them to love their enemy. Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom or a religious Uncle Tom who is doing the same thing today.
Malcolm's message was being heard louder than ever, but his relationship with the man who had life was about to fracture. Tensions were within the nation compared to his mentor, Elijah Muhammad. An unprovoked raid on a Nation of Islam mosque by police in Los Angeles led to one member being paralyzed and another being killed. No charges were laid against the police.
The white man believes you when you go to him with that old sweet talk, because you've been sweet talking him ever since he brought you here. Stop sweet talking. Tell him how you feel. Tell him what kind of hell you've been catching, and let him know that if he's not ready to clean his house up, if he's not ready to clean his house up, he shouldn't have a house. It should catch on fire and burn down.
Malcolm was reportedly stunned by Elijah Muhammad's refusal to allow any form of retaliation for the incident. The two disagreed over Malcolm's desire to begin working with civil rights organizations, black politicians, and other religious organizations. Then, suddenly,
here is a bulletin from CBS News. 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. President Kennedy has been seriously wounded.
Malcolm's response to the Kennedy assassination led to him being officially silenced for 90 days.
Malcolm X, you were involved in a controversy some months ago with your leader. Is that over?
Well, I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
They were distorted?
And yes.
What did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate. But only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing.
In March of 1964, Malcolm publicly announced his break from the Nation of Islam. He also expressed a desire to work with other civil rights leaders, saying that Elijah Muhammad had prevented him from doing so. Then came a bombshell.
Well, in reality, I never even left the Muslim movement. They put me out. And they put me out because of what I knew, and what I knew was told to me by Mr. Muhammad's son, Wallace Muhammad himself. They put was Elijah Muhammad himself.
Any of these illegitimate with the sisters?
Well, he made 6 sisters. All had children. Those 6 had 2 children. I am told that there is a 7th sister who is supposed to be in Mexico right now, and she's supposed to be having a child.
Might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh yes, I probably am a dead man already.
After splitting from the nation, Malcolm began learning the tenets and practices of Sunni Islam. He founded the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, a religious organization, and the Organization of Afro-American Unity, a non-religious group promoting Pan-Africanism. He had softened his position on Martin Luther King, who he met only once in person. And later the same year, he performed Hajj, the Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca. This was to be yet another transformative experience for him.
When I was on the pilgrimage, I had close contact with Muslims whose skin would in America be classified as white, and with Muslims who themselves would be classified as white in America. But these particular Muslims didn't call themselves white. They looked upon themselves as human beings, as part of the human family, and therefore they looked upon all other segments of the human family as part of that same family. Now, they had a different look, or a different air, or a different attitude, that which is reflected in the attitude of the man in America who calls himself white. So I said that if Islam had done that for them, perhaps the man in America would study Islam. Perhaps it could do the same thing for him.
After Malcolm moved to Africa, and speaking on radio and television across the continent. In Cairo, he attended the second meeting of the Organization of African Unity and met Africa's most high-profile leaders, including Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, and Ahmed Ben Bella of Algeria, who all offered him official positions in their respective governments. He met with Fidel Castro and was one of the first African-American leaders to meet the newly created Palestinian Liberation Organization, and was one of the pioneers of a tradition of Black Palestinian solidarity that would be continued by the Black Panther Party and the Black Lives Matter movement. A common misconception about Malcolm's philosophical evolution is that his process of turning to Sunni Islam softened his political positions. While it's true that Malcolm abandoned some of the nation's more extreme separatist positions on race, he remained a staunch black nationalist.
I think what a lot of people are interested in, Malcolm, is whether this experience has made you feel that your feelings have changed, that the animosity you have expressed in the past toward all whites.
There's one thing that I want to make clear. No matter how much respect, no matter how much recognition whites show toward me, as far as I'm concerned, as long as that same respect and recognition is not shown toward every one of our people in this country, it doesn't exist for me.
If anything, Malcolm's travel had led him to globalize his perspective, seeing black liberation as something beyond the United States, and as something that was intimately tied to struggles for independence across the Third World.
It has remained a domestic problem. It has remained within the jurisdiction of the United States. And as such, it has been impossible for the Afro-Americans or American Negroes to try and enlist the support of other dark-skinned people who were being oppressed the world over in that struggle. And the only way this can be done is by internationalizing the problem.
If you take up arms, you'll end it. But if you sit around and wait for the one who's in power to make up his mind that he should end it, you'll be waiting a long time. And in my opinion, the young generation of whites, blacks, browns, whatever else there is, you're living at a time of extremism, a time of revolution, a time when there's got to be a change.
The Nation of Islam had not taken Malcolm's exit and public criticism of Elijah Muhammad's misconduct lightly. His family was repeatedly threatened, their car was bombed, and FBI surveillance records show that law enforcement was aware that elements within the nation were openly discussing his death. Then his house was burned down. On February 21st, 1965, Malcolm was addressing the Organization of Afro-American Unity in Manhattan's Audubon Ballroom. He was shot 21 times. 3 Nation of Islam members were tried and convicted of the murder, but questions remained. At the time of his death, Malcolm was under surveillance by both the NYPD and the FBI's COINTELPRO operation. For many, there is simply no doubt that one or both organizations had a hand in his assassination. Malcolm's legacy went on to be preserved in hip-hop, film, and literature. Most importantly, his own autobiography, which continues to be celebrated and was named one of the 10 most influential non-fiction books of the 20th century. His politics continue to inspire generations of activism against racism and imperialism worldwide.
People in power have misused it, and now there has to be a change, and a better world has to be built, and the only way it's going to be built is with extreme methods. And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth. Thank you.
Malcolm's funeral was held in Harlem. Some estimate that up to 30,000 people attended. Actor and activist Ossie Davis delivered the eulogy.
Harlem has come to bid farewell to one of its brightest hopes, extinguished now and gone from us forever. Many will ask what Harlem finds to honor in this stormy, controversial, and bold young captain. And we will smile. Many will say, turn away, away from this man, for he is not a man, but a demon, a monster, a subverter, and an enemy of the black man. And we will answer and say unto them, did you ever talk to Brother Malcolm? Did you ever touch him or have him smile at you? Did you ever really listen to him? Malcolm was our manhood, our living black manhood. This was his meaning to his people. And in honoring him, we honor the best in ourselves. What we place in the ground is no more now a man, but a seed, which, after the winter of discontent, will come forth again to meet us. And we shall know him then for what he was and is, a prince, our own black shining prince, who did not hesitate to die because he loved us so.
You now use Shabazz and drop X?
I'll probably continue to use Malcolm X and I'll probably use it as long as the situation that produced it exists.
Ghana is encouraging more descendants of the slave trade to visit their motherland, and for this, 2019 was declared a year of return. A lot of African Americans saw this opportunity to finally make their trip home. This included celebrities around the world, one of whom is Steve Harvey. Steve is a famous American entertainer. In this video, he has a message for all Africans after his soul cleansing experience in Ghana. Hello everyone, here is Esiru from OAS Africa, and you are welcome back to my channel.
I was in Ghana. We came to commemorate the 400 years the first slave ship left. It was the second worst day of my life. The worst day of my life, my mama died. I never really fully got over that. But standing in them dungeons, where they took us from, where they stripped us of our heritage, of our land, of our lineage, that we were kings, chiefs, queens, landowners. They took us from here. When I stood in that castle, I couldn't even stand up. See, for us to come to Africa, you don't know. See, you live here. You've been home your whole life. You here. When we come here, it's like coming home to a place you've never been. That's what African Americans feel when we come here. I don't know who, but when I stood in that slave dungeon, one of my ancestors was there. And I failed. I couldn't even stand up because one of my ancestors was in that room. Man, see, then we went to the second castle. I didn't have that feeling. I was just angry. What they did to us. How dare you create an evil scheme to strip people of who they are and take us to this land far away where we were hated even more. And then we go over here and we build a nation. We built America. There are families today in America still benefiting from the billions of dollars from the slave trade. They opened up canneries, tobacco fields, they opened up ketchup companies, they opened up dealerships with the money that their ancestors made off of slavery. And this country still benefits, the great America, which I was born in, still benefits from the slave trade. This atrocity lasted 400 years. 400 years. Some of us, African Americans, are the first ones to ever set foot of where we from. You and I are the same. When I'm walking around Botswana, I ain't no stranger. Y'all mine, I'm yours. I'm black like you. I'm African. See, you don't understand. I'm 62 years old. I know you can't believe it. I'm so fly. I'm so fresh and clean.
Subscribe if you haven't already and like this video.
I've been around long enough. I was born in 1957 when we was niggas. I lived until they started calling us colored. I lived until they called us Negroes. I lived until they called us black. And we finally understood that we Africans. So now in America, you have to identify us as Africans. African Americans. I've been through the whole gamut. You can't tell me nothing about this here. You know how hard we fought to identify with you? So we got to start embracing one another. We need to come here and feel you. We need to come here and embellish you. We need to come here and teach you what we learned. Now, America's a land of opportunity, if you want it, but it has its problems for us. When we get pulled over by the police, we can get killed. Slavery over, apartheid over, the residue is still there. We go into a store with a hoodie on, we walk down the street with a hoodie on, Trayvon Martin, they kill us, they get off, they go home. The man selling cigarettes in New York, police chokes him to death, kills him, he go back to work. Philippe up in Minnesota, stopped by the police on Facebook Live. Watch him shoot the black man. The girl said, "Why did you shoot him?" He said, "I don't know." He free. The police that beat Rodney King to death, to a pulp, they free. Huh? That's why we say, hold up. African American. And as successful as I've been over there, as wonderful as I've created life for my family, I want nothing more than to come home. Nothing means more to me than to come home. You've been on my vision board for 7 years. Africa has been on my vision board.
Help people understand how incredible this country is and how proud we are as Ghanaians. And
I found out the majority of my heritage is from Ghana. And so it's great to be able to come back home, so to speak.
It feels great to be home. You know, this is my second trip to Ghana, you know, to see and experience everything that they have to offer.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you. I don't think people understand how it feels for a lot of African Americans to come home to a place you've never been. I mean, how you never been home before? I think it's emotional for everybody. Every African American should experience it for their own soul. It's for your soul.
We understand the life force and the life being and everything in this universe and its connectivity. And we have to return back to our own narratives and our own truth in order for the African spirit to rise. Because just as they suppress that, they suppress you and I, because our humanity is in our culture. So the return represents returning back to the pride and the dignity that we survive with as a people, which is our culture.
To be honest, this is probably going to be and I'm going to say this at this table, the most pro-black president that we've had in our lifetime.
So had that asked me, I would have said, you know, before you praise this president for being pro-black, before you praise this president for caring about ethnic communities and marginalized populations, do your homework. Well, some of y'all didn't do your homework. They didn't do their homework. So let me tell you just a little bit of research, not just him personally, but also some of his policies. Perhaps before they went and sat at the table, they should have done their homework, because if they had done their homework, they would have known that President Trump has ramped up mass incarceration by instructing Attorney General Jeff Sessions to revitalize the war on drugs. They would have known that of the 87 picks for federal judges, 85 been white, just one has been black, and one has been Hispanic. They would have known that President Trump supported the Department of Justice engaging in unlawful voter purges charges making it difficult for blacks to go and vote. They would have known that Trump is ending protection for predatory lenders, which disproportionately harm black people. They would have known that he is ignoring the affordable housing crisis by ordering HUD to triple the rents of poor tenants in public housing, which mostly affect black people. Do your homework. They would have known that he is proposing cutting $200 billion over the next 10 years from supplemental nutrition assistance programs that will bring more hunger in black and brown communities. They would have known that Trump is worsening the health of black communities through environmental deregulation, which disproportionately harms black people through exposure to pollution. Now, that's just a few on the policy side, but you don't have to go too far to ask, what about him personally would make me know that he is not pro-black? I'm glad you asked, because in 1970, Trump's real estate company tried to avoid renting apartments to black tenants and gave preferential treatment to white tenants. He began his 2016 presidential campaign with a speech disparaging Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists. Y'all remember that? In 2016, he said of people of color, you are living in poverty, your schools are no good, you have no jobs. Hold on, I'm a product of a HBCU, and I'm a product of black school systems and black teachers. Don't you ever tell me that my black schools are... Hold on, I ain't done. He says you have no jobs, so what do you have to lose from electing me? In 2017, Trump said 15,000 recent immigrants from Haiti all have AIDS, and 40,000 Nigerians once seeing the United States would want to go back to their huts in Africa. He spent years suggesting that the first president was not a citizen of these United States. He called Puerto Ricans, criticized his administration's he called them politically motivated ingrates. Hold on, but he called those who marched white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia, he called them very fine people. He hired Steve Bannon, a nationalist, as his strategist. He called Haiti and other African nations whole countries, and he's taking credit for an economy that has not been built on his administration, on years of hard work under the Obama administration. Negroes, please, don't you come up in here talking about this is the most pro-black president you have ever seen, when the record suggests that he cares nothing about.
And when you are willing and not afraid anymore to pay the price for freedom, don't let this white man tell you that violence is wrong. Every damn thing that he got it by being violent, killing people, raping and robbing and murdering. He's doing it as we speak, and then he has the nerve to come and tell us that violence and hatred won't get it. Don't buy that. He's worthy to be hated. Worthy. Because of the evil that he does. God hates. I don't know why man think you're better than God, when God in the Bible said he loved Jacob, but he hated Esau. In the Bible, he said no man can serve two masters. He'll love one and hate the other. They have made us little sheep that they can walk over and run over, but when we decide it's over, and we should make that decision, it's over, we're not taking it anymore, and we cannot pass on to another generation the legacy of our cowardice when we know the problem and won't move to erase the problem. That's our fault. We gotta change. See, one of the things that our ancient people knew, yours and mine, when it got to the point where they would be extinguished, they had to fight. Even if they lost, they had to fight. So the great warrior spirit came up out of us. Same with the blacks. Same in Haiti. Same in Central and South America. The Maroons. All of those came to a position where they had to fight. In that church, where 9 of our brothers and sisters were shot down by a skunk. How in the hell are we justified in offering him love and he offers us death?
Somebody asked me the other day.
Excuse me for my passion.
That's
brother.
okay. They asked me, can you forgive him? And I looked at him, I said, no, I cannot forgive him because he knew what he was doing. He was cold and calculated, and he was fostering the same hate.
Who asked you that question, brother? Did he look like us?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of them.
Yeah, I know.
How in the hell? I mean, it's an insult
It
to
is
me
an insult.
that you're going to ask me, can you forgive? How long have people been kind of evil to the darker people since they've been here? And when we make up our mind, it's better to be dead than to live under tyranny all the days of your life. Separated from England, the tyranny of King George. Too much them to do. They decided death is Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. And until we come up with that kind of mind, I'd rather be dead than to live continuously under this kind of tyranny. And when you think like that, you'll do what is necessary to move the tyrant. With the help of God, we will win if we fight.
Founded on genocide and built on the backs of slaves. All right. So we started with a. We wanted to eliminate one entire race, and then we used another race to build this country actually quite quickly as a new country into a world power. This country never would have had the wealth that it had it not had slavery for a couple of hundred years.
But say to white people, look, you didn't do it. They say, yeah, that's right. We didn't have nothing to do with slavery. Yeah. But because of slavery, when you immigrants came here, America was already built with the blood, the sweat of my ancestors. So you got what you got because your fathers gave us what they gave us.
One mistake that's been made is showing how acquired their wealth off of the backs of our ancestors. And even then, it's reduced to just a few slave owners who saw a real benefit. No. Chattel slavery of blacks benefited the South, but just as much it benefited the North and all of America and its many European immigrants. America's economic structure was propelled by its dominant export, sold throughout the world, cotton. This one crop provided over half of all U.S. exports earnings. And by 1840, 60% of the world's cotton was grown, picked, and labored over for free by our ancestors. These plantation owners were raking in money, accumulating great wealth, and never having to pay one dime to their laborers. But the North was just as involved. The North developed a variety of businesses that provided services to the slave South, like textile factories, insurance companies, shippers, and cotton brokers. But it doesn't stop at the slave owner or the businesses that provided the services to the slave system. Banks, yes. Bankers on Wall Street made millions selling goods to the South, along with giving loans and creating banks to finance Southern plantations. And much of this same wealth they still have today. Let me give you some examples. J.P. Morgan and Chase Bank admitted that between the years of 1831 to 1865, two of their predecessor banks, Citizens Bank and Canal Bank in Louisiana, accepted 13,000 slaves as collateral on loans that slave masters defaulted. One of the more successful banking families that built much of their wealth on the slave trade was the Brown family, more commonly known as the Brown Brothers and Harriman Company, which is the oldest and largest private investment bank. The Brown Brothers owned hundreds of slaves. This family dominated the cotton industry. They made a huge fortune by lending millions to southern planters and cotton brokers. Another portion of their wealth came by renting the sales of slave ships they sold to slave merchants. They served as one of the most important sources of capital in foreign exchange in the U.S. economy. Wachovia Bank, recently acquired by Wells Fargo, also profited heavily off of this cruel system. Mayer Rothschild, a German banker and the founder of the Rothschilds banking dynasty, which is believed to have become the wealthiest family in human history, made enormous gains by using our ancestors as collateral. The insurance industry also saw great benefits from slavery. Companies like AIG, Aetna, New York Life were the forerunners in this industry. But see, it's also very important to note that these same plantation owners and business owners would donate large sums of this wealth in order to train their children and the next generation on containing the wealth. For example, Harvard. Harvard was built due to large amounts of money given by Isaac Royal, a plantation owner in the Caribbean islands of Antigua, who made a massive fortune off of his many sugar plantations. Yale was able to build its famous library and establish its prestigious scholarship program. Princeton. By the mid-1700s, many of its students were sons of plantation owners. Brown University, named after the famous slave owner banker, the Brown Brothers. A large portion of this campus was built with slave labor. And these are just a few of the many institutions that was built with slave money. See, these men would be looked at as great businessmen, philanthropists. But in actuality, they were securing the wealth of their future by training and educating the next generation that would take over their plantations and their businesses, and even become government officials, responsible for creating laws, regulations, and policies that would keep blacks fighting for human rights and access to this stolen wealth for decades. For decades after slavery, blacks have fought against unequal education, which is a sure way of ensuring wealth disparities. We fought grandfather clauses to prevent us from affecting government in ways that could transfer wealth. Land grants, free land issued from the government that blacks were restricted from. The black codes, housing restrictions, redlining and FDA guarantee loans, predatory bank lending, convict leasing, which utilized black labor but does not transfer the wealth. I wish that I could say that this wealth disparity in America was isolated only in America, but it's not.
All the wealth that was generated that helped to make Britain great, so-called, the British Empire, all of this came from enslavement and colonialism and ill-gotten gains. And it links to this modern discussion around inequality and the huge gap between the nations, not only in terms of Britain and Europe, but also the rest of the world, and in particular, Africa and the Caribbean.
The truth is, this is the same scenario across every colonized land. Today, as a people, we fight for the Confederate flags to come down. We even fight for people to stop using the word nigger. Right. or other forms of bigotry to not be used. But we've been duped into believing that it's absolutely foolish to continue to fight for reparations. Many of us don't recognize the direct ties between the past and the wealth that was carried into today. Our ancestors were forced to invest in this economy without ever receiving a return. Unlike Jews, reparations were never paid to slaves or their descendants to help balance out this unjustified wealth. But understand that the reason our ancestors were enslaved was not for the purpose of being able to call us right. It was not even for the purpose of being able to raise a slave flag. No, all of the killing, the torturing, dehumanizing, inhumane treatment all boiled down to one reason: wealth. It was all business. Understand that. I know that our brother Martin did.
I still have a dream.
Not that one.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, when Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
I've been seeing a lot of things talking about the people commentary. Interestingly, the ones I've noticed in making the commentary are wealthy black people making commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, you know, I feel like we should do both. And I feel like I support both. And I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest, like there are three types of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, there are looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want to fuck shit up, and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. Now, people are like, well, what did you gain? What did you get from looting? I think that as long as we're focusing on the what, not focusing on the why, and that's my issue with that. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, well then, let's go with that. Let's say that's what it is. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that change, getting that bed, getting that phone, whatever it is that they're going to get, is that in that moment when the riots happen and if they present an opportunity of looting, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Why are people that food insecure, that clothing insecure, that they feel like their only shot, that they are shooting their shot by walking through a broken glass window to get what they need. And then people want to talk about, well, there's plenty of people who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and got it on their own. Why can't they do that? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. And I'm so glad that as a child I got an opportunity to spend time at Push where they taught me this, is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money. I didn't allow you to have anything on the board. I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played other 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play, and every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally at the release and the onset of that, they allow you to play, and they say, okay, now you catch up. Now at this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is the person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you, and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every that I played, and you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood. How can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the fuck do I give a shit about burning the fucking Football Hall of Fame, about burning a fucking Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give a fuck. You broke the contract when for 400 years we put and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so fuck your Target. Fuck Hall of Fame. Because they could burn this bitch to the ground. And it still would be enough. And they are lucky that what people are looking for is stability and not revision.
A police meeting in Mesa, Arizona is getting a lot of attention. It has to do with a man named Robert Johnson who was not suspected of crime. He was not reported to authorities. He just happened to be in the apartment complex with his friend who was involved in a potential domestic dispute. Now, I'm going to give you the details of that in just a second, but the video you're about to watch is graphic, difficult to even look at. With that said, take a look at how multiple police officers respond to a man who did nothing wrong.
Okay, so they hit him in the face 14 times. You'll see him go unconscious. Jesus Christ.